What happens when Jason Momoa sits down on a daytime talk show panel expecting a light conversation, only to be pressed, challenged, and pushed a little too far by Sunny Hostin? Make sure to subscribe to the Star Talks and like and comment for more talk show coverage. The camera catches the panel settling in, the audience applauding as the energy rises. Jason leans forward with that relaxed grin he usually carries, but there's already a quiet sense of anticipation, like everyone feels the conversation might go somewhere unexpected. The table quiets just enough for the host to toss to him, and he gives a small wave to the crowd, prompting another round of cheers. Whoopi tries to start light, joking about his boots, and Jason chuckles, wiggling them under the table, but the atmosphere shifts the moment Sunny clears her throat. She jumps in sooner than expected, cutting slightly over Anna, who is about to ask something more playful. Sunny's voice is steady, almost too serious for the opening minutes. She brings up a comment Jason made months ago in another interview, something about the industry pushing people into boxes, and she says it in a way that feels pointed. The audience shifts, a couple of murmurs passing through the studio. Jason blinks like he didn't expect that to be the first question, and he nods slowly, elbows on the table as he processes. He starts answering carefully, keeping his tone respectful, explaining that he meant Hollywood often expects actors to stay inside certain images or archetypes. He's barely a sentence in before Sunny cuts in again, saying that people use that same complaint to avoid responsibility for what they choose to portray. There's a small ooh from the back row, a soft smattering of nervous laughs. Jason glances at Whoopi, then back at Sunny, and the warmth drops from his expression just slightly, not anger, more that look someone gives when they're recalibrating mid-conversation. Whoopi steps in, gently trying to smooth things over, reminding Sunny they just started the segment, but Sunny isn't letting go. She presses again, asking whether Jason thinks he contributes to the stereotypes he says he dislikes. Anna tries to lighten it, joking about how even stereotypes aren't complaining when Jason plays them, and the audience laughs loudly, grateful for the tension break. Jason smiles at Anna, appreciating the air, but Sunny doesn't crack. Jason finally raises his hand a little, the universal "let me speak" gesture, and he says he wants to answer the question fully. His voice stays calm, but firmer than before. He explains that actors don't always get to choose how they're framed, and that it's complicated: studios, scripts, marketing, audience expectations. He says he tries to bring depth into roles, even when they're written without much nuance. The crowd nods along, some clapping lightly. Sunny listens with her arms crossed, and right as Jason finishes, she leans in with one of those pointed follow-ups. "But do you think you've ever benefited from playing into them?" The audience reacts louder this time, a mix of gasps, whoas, and that tense laughter people do when they're not sure whether someone's being bold or just poking the bear. Jason laughs softly, but it's not the carefree laugh from the beginning. It's tighter. He pushes his hair back and says, "Sunny, everyone in Hollywood benefits from something. Every single person at this table does." The audience erupts at that line, some cheering, some groaning, loving the drama. Jason continues, saying that they're all part of a machine bigger than any individual actor, and pretending otherwise isn't realistic. Sarah tries to jump in with a more neutral question to redirect, but Sunny isn't finished and starts over her. The overlap makes the audience react again, unsure who to listen to. Whoopi raises her hand, trying to restore order, reminding everyone, "Let him finish, please." Jason nods appreciation. Sunny then shifts the topic to another area, his comments on how the industry handles masculinity. She says some people felt his statements were contradictory, especially because some of his most famous roles portray aggressive or hyper-masculine characters. Jason leans forward sharply, not hostile but clearly tired of being spoken for. He says, "I can talk about masculinity because I've lived on both sides of it. What I show on screen doesn't always match who I am, and that shouldn't confuse anyone." A few audience members clap. One whistles, which breaks the seriousness for a moment. Sunny counters with a carefully worded critique. She says that when a celebrity talks about toxicity in the industry while playing roles that capitalize on the same traits, it creates mixed messaging. Jason stares at her, really stares, not angry but deeply processing. The rest of the panel looks back and forth between them like watching a tennis match. Then Jason says, "I'm allowed to talk about something I've experienced." That's not mixed messaging, that's honesty. The line lands hard. The audience responds instantly with a big wave of applause. Even Anna's eyebrows shoot up. Sunny opens her mouth to respond, but the reaction in the room is loud enough that she has to pause for a beat. Jason takes that moment to continue, saying he's not here to present himself as perfect. He just knows what it's like to be boxed in and wants better for the next generation of actors. He reminds her that discussing a problem doesn't mean he's claiming innocence. It means he's acknowledging reality. Sarah nods vigorously, backing him up verbally, mentioning how many actors express similar struggles. Sunny shrugs and says she's simply asking questions people want answered. Jason responds with, "I can handle hard questions. Just give me the room to answer them before assuming I'm dodging anything." His voice has that deep firmness people rarely hear from him. The audience goes wild, clapping, cheering, someone even shouting, "Let him talk." This is when the energy fully shifts. Whoopi leans back like she's trying not to laugh at how intense it's getting. Anna covers her mouth with her cue card for a moment. Sunny straightens in her seat, almost challenging Jason with her posture, but she doesn't interrupt again, at least not immediately. Jason finishes this segment by stating that these conversations matter, but they can only happen if there's respect on both sides. He nods at Sunny directly, then at the rest of the table. The camera cuts briefly to the studio audience, and the reaction is mixed. Some people nod in agreement with Jason, others look fascinated by the growing tension. The moderator signals they have to go to commercial soon, and Whoopi gives a half-joking sigh of relief, saying, "We're just getting started, folks." Jason leans back, exhaling. Sunny adjusts her mic pack, and the buzz in the room is the kind that only happens when a daytime show hits a nerve early on. The screen begins to fade as the applause cue lights up, and the hosts shuffle in their chairs, clearly preparing for a much more heated second round. The show comes back from commercial with that familiar audience applause, although it's noticeably louder than usual, like people are reacting to the tension that hung in the air just a few minutes earlier. The camera cuts across the table, catching Jason adjusting his jacket and Sunny tapping her pen against the cards in front of her. Whoopi is the first to speak, trying to bring the room back into a neutral place. She jokes softly that only this show could turn an intro segment into a full debate. The audience laughs, but you can hear that edge of anticipation. Everyone knows the conversation isn't finished. Jason gives a small nod to Whoopi and tries to smile, but Sunny immediately leans into her mic and says she wants to pick up where they left off. Even Anna raises her eyebrows like, "Already?" Jason turns his shoulders slightly towards Sunny, giving her his full attention, and the studio gets quiet. You can almost hear people shifting in their chairs. Sunny begins by clarifying that her goal isn't to attack him personally. She says she respects his work, but feels the topics he speaks on publicly deserve deeper scrutiny. She reminds him that millions look to celebrities for cultural influence. Jason listens with an expression that isn't defensive, but isn't relaxed either. It's the look of someone gearing up for a conversation they know won't stay calm. Jason responds by thanking her for the clarification, but he adds that scrutiny has to go both ways. The media also shapes narratives around actors. Sunny says she's absolutely aware of that, but she also insists actors have a responsibility to choose roles that reflect the values they express. Anna jumps in, noting that sometimes actors don't get the luxury of turning roles down, especially early in their careers. Jason snaps his fingers and points at her, thanking her for saying it. Sunny then says she's talking more about the current Jason Momoa, not the early career version of him. She says, "At this point, you have the power to choose. So what message do you want to send with those choices?" The audience reacts with a low, impressed hum. It's a sharp question, and everyone feels it. Jason takes a breath and folds his hands on the table. He says he wants to make work that has heart, that shows vulnerability, that breaks the idea that strong men have to be emotionally closed. He says he's working on projects that reflect that. Sunny presses again, saying she's glad to hear that but wonders why his public comments sometimes sound like he's blaming the industry instead of acknowledging his influence within it. Jason's jaw tightens just slightly, subtle but visible. Sarah senses the tension rising and leans in, offering a softer angle. She says Jason has talked openly about evolving as an actor and a man, and that evolution doesn't cancel out earlier choices. But Sunny cuts in again, asking, "But where's the accountability in saying, I benefited from portraying certain kinds of characters?" The audience reacts louder this time, a mix of gasps and knowing laughter, sensing the directness of the moment. Jason leans back, crosses his arms, and then uncrosses them like he decides not to bring that energy to the table. He says calmly, You keep assuming I'm avoiding accountability. I'm literally telling you that everyone in this industry benefits from something. I'm not exempt. I've said that. He gestures toward her, not aggressively but firmly. You're framing this like I'm dodging responsibility, but I'm actually being honest about it. Sunny maintains eye contact, but she doesn't interrupt. Jason continues, saying accountability doesn't mean he has to apologize for every role he's played, especially when those roles were part of his growth. He says the bigger point is that Hollywood as a whole needs to be better about how masculinity is portrayed. And that includes him. Anna, trying again to lighten things, jokes that the audience is getting a free therapy session. People laugh, breaking the tension briefly. Jason even smiles at that, but the heaviness doesn't fully go away. Sunny then shifts, surprisingly, into a different angle. She brings up a recent viral clip where Jason joked about pressure to stay in a certain physical shape for a role, and she asks whether comments like that reinforce unrealistic expectations for men. Jason looks genuinely surprised by the pivot, but takes a moment to answer. He says the pressure is real, and he speaks about it because it affects actors and viewers alike. He explains that being transparent about those expectations doesn't mean he supports them. It means he's calling them out. Sunny counters that transparency can also normalize the pressure. The audience reacts again, some disagreeing audibly. A man in the front row actually shakes his head and says, "Come on," which gets scattered laughs. Jason's posture shifts. He sits up straighter, leaning forward, hands clasped. His voice gets deeper and very controlled. He says, "Look, Sunny, I'm not trying to normalize anything. I'm trying to show people that even someone who looks like me can struggle with this stuff. I'm human. I get insecure. I get tired. Hollywood chews everyone up, men, women, everybody. That's why I talk about it." The audience applauds this time, louder, more unified. Even Anna taps the table in agreement. Sunny nods slowly, acknowledging his point, but she says there's still a line between vulnerability and inadvertently reinforcing harmful standards. Jason cuts in gently but firmly, saying people need to stop pretending actors have to be perfect advocates every time they open their mouths. He says he's learning and unlearning things, just like everyone else, and he's not afraid to talk about the messy parts. The applause comes again louder. Sunny starts to speak, but Whoopi steps in for the first time with a tone that signals she's taking control. She says the table is supposed to be a place for conversation, not interrogation. The audience claps at that, and Sunny lifts her eyebrows, half in amusement, half in surprise that Whoopi said it outright. Jason nods appreciatively, but then turns back to Sunny and adds, "I can take tough questions. I just won't take assumptions." That line detonates the room, a mix of cheers, gasps, and even a couple of shocked laughs. Sunny purses her lips, clearly feeling the heat, but staying composed. Anna tries to pivot to something lighter, one of Jason's new projects, but Sunny isn't letting the topic move yet. She says she still has a question about the expectations Jason sets for younger viewers who look up to him. The audience reacts with a drawn-out, "Oh," because the persistence is becoming its own storyline. Jason breathes out, visibly grounding himself before responding. He says he wants young actors and fans to know they don't have to fit any mold, that strength isn't about muscles, and masculinity isn't about shutting down. He says real strength is being emotionally accessible, showing fear when it exists, and talking about things that hurt. His tone is calm but emotional, and the room quiets to hear him. Sunny listens, and to everyone's surprise, she softly says, "I appreciate that answer." The audience gives a small, warm applause at the unexpected agreement. Whoopi takes that as the perfect moment to break the tension and finally transition to the next topic. She jokes that the table might need hydration after all the heat. The audience laughs, grateful for the release. Jason grins, wiping his forehead playfully as if he's sweating from the debate. Even Sunny smirks, letting the moment land. But the energy feels precarious, like the conversation could reignite at any second. Especially because the producers are signaling that the next segment involves fan questions, and those are always unpredictable. The camera pans out as the panel shifts in their seats, preparing for the next wave. The applause sign flashes again, but this time the cheers feel mixed with nervous curiosity. The audience knows the most intense moments are probably still ahead. The applause fades as the camera settles back on the panel, and Whoopi announces that they're moving into fan questions. The audience cheers again, but the energy is different. Everyone knows this segment can either cool things down or pour gasoline on what's already sizzling. Jason sits forward slightly, arms resting on the table, like he's ready for anything. Sunny straightens her cards but keeps her eyes on him, the tension still sitting between them like a third guest. A producer hands Sarah a card with the first audience-submitted question. She reads it aloud with a smile. Someone wants to know how Jason maintains balance between action-heavy roles and being emotionally open in real life. Jason visibly relaxes. This is familiar territory. He answers warmly, saying his kids and personal relationships keep him grounded. He talks about therapy, communication, and surrounding himself with people who challenge him to grow. The audience responds with soft applause, almost grateful for the calmer moment. Anna nods along and adds that she wishes more male actors spoke openly about therapy because it takes pressure off young men watching. Sunny nods too, and the temporary calm feels promising. But then Sunny leans forward again and says, "I want to tie that into something else." And immediately Jason's posture shifts. The audience murmurs. They know what that means. Sunny begins referring back to an earlier point about messaging. She says vulnerability is important, but she wonders if Jason ever worries that fans might misunderstand what he means when he speaks about masculinity. Jason takes a slow breath, resting his fingertips against the table, and responds that people misunderstand everyone. That being misunderstood is part of being public. He says he can't tailor his words to perfection just to avoid criticism. Sunny agrees in theory, but she pushes again. But don't you think clarity is important when you have such a huge platform? The room shifts. You can feel it in the quietness. Jason responds with a measured tone, saying he values clarity, but clarity doesn't always mean simplicity. Sometimes complex experiences require messy explanations. He adds that men who look up to him aren't fragile. They can handle nuance. A ripple of applause passes through the studio. Sunny gives a small, tight smile, acknowledging that the audience is clearly siding with him in the moment. Whoopi steps in before the tension spikes again, asking for the next fan question. She glances at the producer like she's hoping for something light. The next question is read by Anna, and it's definitely not light. A viewer asks whether Jason feels pressured to act tough in interviews because people expect him to be a certain way. Jason laughs, but it's a thinking laugh. He says yes, absolutely. People often assume he's this tough guy who can't be bothered by anything, and he pushes back on that. He talks about feeling boxed in by expectations and how he had to unlearn the idea that showing emotion was weakness. Sunny jumps in softly, surprisingly softly, asking whether those expectations come more from Hollywood or from fans. Jason tilts his head, appreciating the nuance in the question, and says both. He says fans often project an image onto him that he doesn't always recognize. The audience quietly hums in agreement. Sarah adds that celebrity culture tends to oversimplify people, turning them into symbols rather than humans. Jason nods, saying that's exactly why he talks about vulnerability, to break that pattern. But Sunny, not letting the moment drift too far into agreement, asks if talking about vulnerability while playing hypermasculine roles sends mixed signals. This time Jason answers faster. He says again that roles are fictional storytelling. Real life is separate. He says audiences should be trusted to differentiate the two. The audience claps, but Sunny leans back with an eyebrow raised, clearly unconvinced. Jason catches the expression and smiles slightly, then says, "I can't change your mind, Sunny, but I can tell you my reality." The crowd reacts loudly, a mix of applause and that "oh" sound that happens when someone pushes back cleanly. Whoopi places a hand on the table, her version of a referee gesture, reminding everyone they're still mid-segment. She then reads another fan question off her card. This one asks about Jason's recent advocacy for environmental issues. Jason's whole body language softens. He loves this topic. He talks passionately about the ocean, sustainability, and the need for more responsibility across industries. The audience applauds enthusiastically, grateful for the positive shift. But Sunny, after listening quietly, connects it back to his earlier statements. She says advocacy requires consistent messaging, and she asks whether Jason worries that public contradictions weaken his impact. The audience reacts, mix of sighs, groans, and a few laughs. Jason's expression tightens again, and he says he doesn't believe in being perfectly consistent all the time because humans are complicated. He says he's allowed to grow, change his mind, and learn publicly. The audience applauds again. Then comes the surprise moment. A member of the live audience is handed a mic for an in-studio question. A young man stands up and nervously says he looks up to Jason because Jason made him feel like being gentle didn't make him less of a man. The studio goes still. Jason's expression softens deeply, and he thanks the man sincerely. It's a grounding moment, emotional, human. The audience applauds warmly. Sunny watches Jason closely during this exchange. When the applause fades, she asks him, more quietly this time, whether that's the message he wants to be known for, redefining masculinity. Jason nods and says yes, that's exactly what he wants. The audience applauds again, but Sunny adds, then I think it's fair to ask whether all your roles support that message. Jason smiles tightly. Here it comes again. Jason says gently that a single role doesn't define an entire body of work. He says change is gradual, in his choices, in the industry, in the culture. Sarah supports him, saying actors often need to take roles strategically to get leverage for the projects they care about. The audience claps, appreciating the insight. Sunny then says, but don't you think we should expect more from our biggest stars? Jason replies, expect more? Yes. Expect perfection? Impossible. The crowd explodes with applause. Even Whoopi taps her cards on the table like a judge hitting a gavel. Anna jumps in to pivot to another question, clearly trying to avoid another full clash. But Sunny has one more follow-up. The audience senses it immediately. Sunny asks Jason whether he feels the criticism he receives is unfair. Jason pauses, a long pause. Then he says he doesn't mind criticism. He minds being mischaracterized. He says when people twist his comments, it feels like they're using his words against him instead of listening to the intent behind them. The room reacts loudly supportive. But Sunny, holding her ground, says intent doesn't erase impact. The audience gasps. Jason exhales slowly, gripping the edge of the table. He says he understands that, but impact can be discussed without assuming the worst of the person behind the words. There's a moment of silence, real silence, where the table just sits in the weight of the conversation. The audience holds its breath. Whoopi finally breaks it with a half-joking sigh, saying, this is what happens when you bring Jason Momoa on the show. We start in the ocean and end in therapy. The audience laughs loudly, grateful for the tension release. But even as the laughter fills the studio, the underlying heat is still there. You can see it in Sunny's posture, in Jason's steady expression, in the way every host glances at the clock. They're heading toward the final segment, and everyone knows the biggest reactions always come right before the show ends. The camera pans out slightly, the applause cue flashes again, and the panel shifts in their seats, all preparing for whatever the final minutes are about to unleash. The applause tapers off as the camera settles back on the table, the red live light glowing a little brighter than usual. Or maybe it just feels that way because the tension has been building all hour. Jason sits forward again, hands clasped, as if he knows the final minutes always bring the most unpredictable moments. Sunny adjusts her mic, Sarah scoots her chair in, and Anna glances at the cue cards like she's silently praying the producers chose something safe for the closing topic. Whoopi leans in, smiling but visibly cautious, and announces that before they wrap, the show wants to give Jason a chance to respond to the broader conversation happening online about him. The audience reacts instantly, a ripple of oohs, scattered laughs, some people sitting up straighter. Jason lifts his eyebrows, surprised but not rattled. Whoopi continues, explaining that whenever Jason does interviews discussing masculinity, vulnerability, or pressure in Hollywood, social media erupts into debates, some supportive, some critical, some chaotic. She asks him how he handles that noise. Jason takes a breath and says he tries to stay grounded, remembering that much of the criticism online comes from people who only see snippets, not the full context. The audience nods knowingly. Anna adds that online discourse often strips nuance out of everything, turning complicated ideas into black and white takes. Jason agrees, saying he understands why people react, but it can be frustrating when a single sentence gets pulled out and turned into a symbol for something he never meant. Sunny listens for a moment, then leans in with a subtle shift, not aggressive, but decisive. She says, but Jason, some of the criticism isn't just about snippets. Some say your comments sound contradictory, even in full context. The audience murmurs again, tension rising for one final round. Jason nods slowly, accepting the direction of the conversation. He says contradictions are part of being human, that he's evolving, learning, and trying to be transparent about things he used to avoid talking about. He says he won't pretend to be flawless just to maintain a tidy public image. Sunny interjects, but this time gently, saying she respects honesty but thinks clarity matters when discussing sensitive topics. Jason replies calmly, "Clarity matters, sure. But honesty matters more. And honestly, I'm figuring things out as I go. I don't have perfect answers. I don't think I should have to." The audience breaks into applause again, some people standing, though the producers quickly gesture for them to sit. Whoopi chuckles into her mic, saying the audience is feisty today. But Sunny presses further, asking whether he feels frustrated when people expect him to be a role model. Jason's response is immediate. "I don't mind being a role model. I mind when people want role models to be perfect." The line lands like a punch. The audience reacts loudly, clapping, cheering, even a whistle from the back. Sunny stays composed, but her expression tightens. Sarah tries to help soften the moment by noting that people often put celebrities on pedestals, expecting them to live idealized lives. Jason nods and adds that he's always tried to show he's not unreachable, that he's a father, a partner, a person with insecurities. He says that if anything, showing that side makes him more relatable. But Sunny has one more point, and the audience senses it before she even speaks. She says that while audiences appreciate vulnerability, they also want accountability, and she asks whether Jason feels he's taken enough responsibility for how his words are perceived. Jason inhales deeply, pressing his palms to the table. His voice is steady but carries weight. He says responsibility isn't the same as guilt. He says he takes responsibility by having conversations like this one. Even when it's uncomfortable, even when he feels misunderstood, even when the questions get sharp. "But I won't apologize for being real," he adds. The audience erupts again, loud, sustained applause that forces the hosts to pause until it quiets. Sunny doesn't interrupt. She watches him thoughtfully, like she's recalibrating everything she planned to say. When the applause fades, she speaks more softly than she has all hour. She tells Jason that while they disagree on certain points, she appreciates that he didn't shut down, didn't get defensive, and didn't try to sidestep tough questions. Jason nods back, acknowledging the gesture. It's a small truce, not perfectly smooth, but real. Whoopi jumps in, sensing the perfect moment to shift gears. She asks Jason what he hopes fans take away from the conversation today. Jason leans back, exhales, and says he hopes people see that men can be strong and soft at the same time. That vulnerability isn't weakness and growth isn't shameful. The audience gives a warm applause, not explosive this time, but heartfelt. Anna taps the table lightly, saying she thinks that message will resonate more than he realizes. Sarah adds that conversations like today's matter, even when they're uncomfortable. Sunny nods again, saying that dialogue is what makes the table meaningful. For the first time all hour, there's unanimous agreement among the hosts. Whoopi then announces they're heading into the final commercial break. The audience cheers, but there's a sense that everyone is still processing what they just watched. As the camera pans out, Jason and Sunny exchange a brief nod, small, subtle, but noticeable. The kind of on-air acknowledgement viewers will absolutely freeze frame and debate online. When the show returns for the closing sign-off, the energy in the room is completely different. Lighter, calmer, but still humming from everything that unfolded. Jason thanks the hosts for having him, saying he didn't expect such a deep conversation, but is glad they had it. Anna jokes that next time they'll talk about puppies instead. The audience laughs. Whoopi wraps the show with her usual send-off. The audience applauds, the music fades in, and the broadcast ends. But the conversation doesn't. Within minutes, the studio audience is buzzing. People are whispering about the back and forth, debating whether Sunny pushed too hard or whether Jason handled it like a pro. Some are still clapping as Jason waves goodbye from the edge of the stage. Producers hover, trying to usher the crowd out, but the energy is too high to dissipate quickly. And then there's social media. Clips hit Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram almost instantly. Fans start posting reactions before the audience is even out the door. Some praise Jason for staying calm, others praise Sunny for asking the tough questions, and a few argue both sides passionately. The hashtag with Jason's name begins trending within the hour. Commentators dissect every moment. The interruptions, the pauses, the sharp questions, the applause breaks. Behind the scenes, the hosts regroup in their dressing rooms, each taking a breath after the intensity of the segment. Jason's team fields calls from press outlets who want follow-up comments. And the network, of course, is thrilled. Heated conversations translate to viral engagement. By the time the dust settles later that night, The episode is being called one of the most talked about segments of the season. If you watched the entire script unfold here, let me know what you think. Did Sunny push too hard? Did Jason handle it well? Was the debate fair or too heated? Share your opinion in the comments and subscribe to the Star Talks for more real talk show stories.